Hey there, gang. Patrick King here, and I want to thank you for tuning in for episode number 12 of Talking About Horses. In these broadcasts, I try to bring you some of the best riders, horsemen, trainers, equine advocates, and thought leaders in the horse industry for tips, insights, and even some stories. You can listen at home, at work, in the car, or even in the saddle, either through Facebook, YouTube, or by downloading the podcast direct from the iTunes Store. Today, I am pleased to be joined by Kendra Skorstad of Skorstad Farrier Service, based in Burlington, Wisconsin. Kendra works with equine athletes to maximize potential through individualized hoof care, specializing in sport horses and rehabilitation. She merges traditional farrier methods and innovative solutions to provide the premium in hoof care to take your horse to the next level of soundness and performance. Kendra, thank you so much for joining me.
Hi, Patrick. Thanks for having me.
Oh, it's awesome to have you here on the show. So, we were chatting a little bit kind of behind the scenes here with some of the things we want to talk about. But first, do you want to introduce folks to you? Tell us a little bit about your history, your background, and then we'll get into this whole idea of hoof care for horse owners.
Sure, absolutely. First and foremost, I'm a horse enthusiast. Anything that has to do with horses, I love it. I am a sponge. I soak up as much information as I can, and I have since I was a little kid. So being a farrier wasn't necessarily something that I had my heart set out to do at a young age. And it's something that I kind of fell into and ended up really loving. And I went to farrier school right out of high school, and I loved the hard work of it. I loved the challenge of science and art and making things look good, but also making them really functional. And there got to be a point in my career a few years in that I realized that, gosh, I didn't know anything. And so I decided to kind of take myself back to school, and I ended up going through different certification programs to learn more about the horse. So massage therapy, acupressure, myofascial. I wanted to know how these beasts worked from the inside out, nose to tail, top to bottom. And I maintained a small hoof care practice while I did all that. And I did practice that professionally for a short time, but I kind of getting pulled back and called back to expanding more and doing more with my farrier business. And so I did. And when I did, I decided to take a different route and go through the barefoot route. And I really enjoyed it. The education and the people that I met was fabulous. And I learned a lot. I didn't realize how much I didn't know about feet and how ill prepared I was to face the world coming out of shoeing school. And so it was fabulous. And since then, I have stepped back to a full-time farriery as far as including shoeing, so not just barefoot. And I have traveled from the East Coast to the West Coast to work with some of the most innovative people, and just people that love to teach and love to share, that are the best at what they do, and they've shaped who I am today. So that's kind of me in a nutshell.
That's awesome. That's fantastic. I didn't realize that you had all the experience with the massage and the acupressure and all of that as well.
Yep, absolutely. I think that they were a huge part of me really starting to put together how this thing we call a horse works, and start to scratch the surface of what I'm doing at the bottom and how it's affecting everything else up above it, and how everything at the top affects everything down at the bottom.
Makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
And that's something that we talk about a lot with our horsemanship also, how all of those things are so connected.
Yep, absolutely.
So awesome. Well, that's actually going to lead us, I think, perfectly into the first little point of discussion. You said that you've got schooling in the massage and the acupressure, and talking about myofascial and all of those things. So we talked a little bit before we went live about creating a wellness team for your horse. Let's talk about that. I think that's a fantastic idea, and I've always recommended that to riders, because I know I try to keep quite a team on hand. I don't even have my own horses right now, and I still try to keep a team on hand that I can chat with. So what would you say goes into creating a wellness team for your horse?
For me, it's a little bit about, it's a little bit the same as what I do for myself. I surround myself professionals and people that know more than I do in their areas of expertise, and that I feel good working with. And so for me, I think that's really important. I want to really like the people that I work with, because if you don't like one of your team members, it's not going to work out well. And so for me, it's finding a trainer I really like. I'm a dressage rider, and my trainer is huge in helping me understand how to use my body. And so I find a good trainer, and then I personally, and a lot of other people do, use them as a reference point for finding a great veterinarian, and finding great farriers. And so for a lot of people, that's where it starts. And if you don't have a trainer, I feel like word of mouth is a great way to start. Find out who's who and interview them. Ask the vets and the farriers questions. Get to know who they are, what their views are, and, does it align with yours? Does it challenge yours? And I think it's good to be challenged, because it expands our awareness and helps us grow and learn more about horses and our relationship with them. Sure. So I think that's really important. Yeah, that's where I have with that.
I think that's great. So who would you recommend to make up the team for the support team for your horse?
It definitely depends on where you're at with your horse. If you are a trail rider, for you, it might just be your vet, and it might be your farrier, and maybe you have a massage therapist or chiropractor that comes in every now and then. And then you might be, an international dressage rider, and then you're going to have them, and you're going to have their mentors, and you're going to have their vet, either as a team vet or the local vet or both, and they're going to have different body workers there as well. So it's going to be different for everybody, and that's okay. And there might be multiple farriers on board depending on the situation that you're in. But I think for the vast majority of people, you're going to need a good farrier, and you're going to need a good trainer and a good vet.
Absolutely. And I think I would probably like to add to that a good equine dentist and somebody knowledgeable about your saddle fit too, huh?
Yes, absolutely.
All right.
I on a personal note that I think that a lot of people resonate with, I've had personal issues with my own horses and have thought it was foot related, and I'm the farrier for this horse that happens to belong to me, and so I've struggled with trying to get her feet right, and thought that we had some back issues and saddle fit issues, and we did, and we've addressed all of those and done all the body work, and I decided to make a change in our dentistry, and it was life altering for her.
Yeah.
It was huge. And so you're totally right. Having a dentist that is knowledgeable about how the teeth affect the jaw and the hyoid apparatus and the tongue and the whole body is so important, because it absolutely affects the feet.
Absolutely. And I've always thought that's probably the first place we should start, because if that's off, the rest of the body will be off. And if the rest of the body's off, there's no way the feet will be true.
Absolutely. I do try as much as I can to communicate with all of my clients. If we're going to get a dentist involved and we're going to have a chiropractor, that I want the dentist to see the horse, and I want the chiropractor, and I want to be last, because I want to put the best possible trim and shoe package, if we're putting shoes on, for that horse, to a balanced horse.
Absolutely. So you mentioned a trim and or shoe package if you're going to be putting shoes on the horse. And you said that after farrier school, you also went, or after the traditional farrier school, you also went on to learn more about barefoot trimming. So let's talk a little bit about kind of the big hot topic, barefoot versus shoeing. What kind of opinions or thoughts would you have on that?
I feel really lucky that I kind of have a middle of a road approach. I think barefoot is best until it's not. And I think shoes are best until they're not. And that is very different and unique to each horse and its environment and its rider. And so I think that it has to be it has to be specific to the individual. I can't think of a situation with horses that you can make a blanket statement across the board. I think barefoot is great because we get good hoof function, and if the foot is landing appropriately, we get good blood perfusion, we get good circulation, good traction. There's been studies that have shown that we even get an increase in the density of the laminae. We get more connections, so we have a stronger, more robust hoof barefoot. So for sure, barefoot, I think, is the ideal that we would all shoot for. But we ride these horses, we drive these horses, we do all sorts of things with them. And so what they can do with their feet for who they are genetically and the environment that we live in with them sometimes doesn't always work for them to be barefoot. And so then I think we need to look at some sort of protection, whether it's boots, glued on shoes, whether it's a composite material or a metal of some sort or a combination thereof. I feel like we have to look at those options as well. And for me, the defining line is if a horse has to live in boots 24/7, and I'm not talking a rehabilitation case from founder or laminitis, but maybe thin soles or something else, that if you have to live in boots 24/7 to maintain soundness, just put shoes on them.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's my big thing. And then shoes, they definitely provide protection. They definitely provide support, and support is great until it's too much. And they definitely help horses be more comfortable, and they help them in their performance. I actually end up finding that I end up shoeing more older horses because they've been working, they've been barefoot, they've been doing well, and now they've developed some arthritis. They're a little uncomfortable, and so they might wear their feet a little crooked a little bit too fast, and I can't get them on a short enough cycle, or for financial reasons or scheduling reasons, to do it on a shorter cycle. So shoes help us provide support and hold the trim and the balance longer.
And that makes perfect sense to me. So you mentioned that sometimes there's such a thing as too much support. What would you mean by that? Restriction?
So when you get too much support, whether your shoe is longer out the back of the foot or too wide, it ends up just becoming leverage. And there comes a point where leverage is just detrimental to the foot.
Gotcha. Okay.
So simple example, long toes, a fair amount of the time can get cracks. Mm-hmm. And so that happens because there's too much leverage on the toe. The body can only take so much leverage before it breaks.
Gotcha. Okay. Yes.
So that's just a simple example of how too much leverage can cause trouble for us.
Okay. Very interesting. So then on the barefoot idea, now maybe this is going to be, I don't know, a little bit of a hot, controversial kind of an idea. I don't know, and you can probably help me with this. But we have a lot of people, I hear people lots of times talking about this idea of the natural Mustang hoof structure and the feral horse hoof structure, and how we want to try to aim to recreate that. And I'm just going to point to the horse that you and Sean, your husband, just brought home that was living in a feral situation, whose feet we probably wouldn't want to recreate, right? As far as making a performance horse out of him. When we look at the actual structures of a wild horse's feet, they can be pretty darned ugly most of the time. Or am I seeing something different than what you're seeing?
No, I think they can get pretty ugly, for sure. I mean, we saw how many horses out at that ranch, and I can't say one of them had perfect rounded little Mustang rolls on the walls. Right. And horses are moving all the time, and they've got plenty of land to do it and plenty of different types of terrain that they're moving through. Mm-hmm. And so, I can't sit here and say for sure one way or another because I haven't studied the horses out west. So is it maybe different for them? Yeah, totally. It's very possible. But the difference is that my environment here in the Midwest in southern Wisconsin is not the same as your environment out in Virginia. And so there is no way that I could expect the wild horse model that is out west in an arid climate that's rocky ground to hold up for horses in the swampy wetness. There's no way. And so you look at the horses like on the Chincoteague ponies, for example. Those ponies have super long plaited feet.
Yeah, exactly.
Why? Because it works for them, because they need that bigger surface area to stay up on top of the swamp. If they had those tiny little Mustang rolled feet, they'd sink.
Right. Exactly.
You know, so it doesn't work. So
And if they were a performing jumping horse or dressage horse, they would have, with feet like that, they'd have an incredible amount of back pain for all of the foot that they have.
Right. Exactly. And so I think that's also something to take into consideration is what we're asking of them. So for that horse in the wet climate, it works. They're sound. They don't have to do anything. They walk straight lines most of their lives. And so it doesn't bother them. Same thing with the arid desert horses. They're walking straight lines most of their lives. They don't lunge themselves in circles during the day.
Right.
And, you know, but that foot works for them out there, just as that big plaited foot wouldn't work for them. And so it gets tricky in our environment because we get wet, dry. And so trying to find that middle ground between leaving enough foot, but not creating leverage by having too much foot is a fine balance. And so the horse that we just brought home, and a lot of the horses up by him, had fairly remarkably long feet, but they don't have to do anything. And they're all pretty sound for having to do what they do, which is be a horse, eat and sleep and go through normal bodily functions, you know. So it works for them. And as time goes on and it gets long enough, they have enough leverage on that length and it breaks off. And that's pretty normal. And so it looks really raggedy and ugly, but it works for them. I mean, that's nature. It will eliminate it when it needs to, and it typically doesn't break off to a point of detriment. It can, certainly it can, but not usually.
I have to say, I think that was maybe the most insightful or wisest answer I've heard about that. As far as the environment and ecosystem is so different, how can we possibly expect every hoof to fit into one model?
Yeah, definitely.
I love that. And I mean, that kind of goes back to the same idea that barefoot is great until it's not, and shoes are great until they're not.
Right. And I've definitely had horses that have got beautiful feet. And the question gets asked, well, why are we shoeing them? And sometimes it's tradition. It's the way that they wanted to do it. The horse has this job, and so we do it. But there's not a great answer for it. And I don't know that that's a super detriment as long as the horse is happy and healthy. I've definitely had horses with beautiful feet that we've pulled out of shoes for one reason or another, and they've gone better for sure. So, you know, it definitely goes both ways. And I've definitely had horses that are sore and just, you know, maybe just not right. Maybe they just, you know, they're stopping at fences, or they're swapping leads over fences, or they're just something's just not quite right. You know, we put shoes on them and then, gosh, they're just so much happier. And so if we're going to ask horses to live in a world where people are going to ask them to do things, why not make it easier for them to do it?
Amen. It kind of reminds me what my friend Richard Winters says. He's got a line, everything works sometimes.
Right. Totally.
Yeah.
I had my mare barefoot for the longest time. I was like, darn it, I'm a farrier. I can do this. She's going to be barefoot. And I tried everything. That horse just does not like being barefoot. She is the happiest and most comfortable when she's in shoes. So she's in shoes.
Makes sense to me.
Yeah.
Makes sense to me. And, you know, I feel the same way. I've had similar experiences with different horses where, you know, sometimes growing up we had show horses, you know, a lot of performance horses, and we would try to, you know, kind of the whole idea, take the shoes off for the winter, you know, let the feet do their thing. And there were some horses that just couldn't handle it.
Sure.
and no matter what we try. And one of the things that always strikes me is how some horses will just go along, kind of like you mentioned, the horses that maybe have to live in the boots. Horses that'll go along for seemingly forever, just in pain, limping along, and the idea is, well, just let them toughen up. Um, that almost seems
Cruel.
cruel. That's the word I was thinking, but I didn't want to say it. I mean, I
Oh,
would say it borders on abuse.
I do really agree with you, and it's really tough. Horses hide their pain so well, and I think that it gets missed a lot. And for me, if there is something I can do to make his life easier and be less painful, I want to do it. And not just because I want him out of pain, but pain increases cortisol, and it's going to affect the pituitary, and it's going to affect their hormones. I mean, it creates this cascade that's sometimes pretty detrimental overall.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And then we run into all sorts of other problems, behavior issues and things like that, and we wonder, geez, what's going on?
Right.
You know?
Absolutely.
And then the cycle just continues.
And I think that's where having a team approach is really important. I get new clients all the time, and they're not used to farriers asking so many questions.
Mm.
I ask all my clients questions. How are their horses going? How are their leads? Are they better one way or the other? Are they swapping leads? Are they cross-firing? Are they having trouble landing on jumps? Are they having trouble with their piaffe passage? Where are the holds? What are you struggling with that you're thinking might be a training issue? And let me see what I can do to try to help that horse do better. And so I think that's part of that team and communicating and having that two-way conversation, not just with the owners and the riders, but with the vets as well, because I think they're a huge part of it. We need vets to be able to do our job better. There's only so much I can do, and then I need more information, and I have to have our vet involved, and dentistry too. But vets are some of my best people out there.
Absolutely. So how do you go about evaluating then? Say a horse has an issue with piaffe, or with landing wrong over a jump, or some other such issue. How do you go about? What's your process for evaluating if that's potentially a hoof challenge causing those things?
Me personally, I do a lot of high-speed video, and so I'll have the horses go through their normal workouts, and we'll set up cameras and we'll watch them and see what they do, and then afterwards we'll sit there and break it down, and we'll talk to the riders and we'll get their feedback. This is what it feels like, and that's really challenging. When my horse feels weak behind, or he feels like he's a little slow behind, he feels tentative, and then I have to figure out what those words mean in relationship to the video that I'm watching, and watching how that horse is using his legs, because I'm not just shoeing the foot, I'm shoeing for the body, I'm shoeing the horse.
Yes, right.
And then make decisions from there, and it's a little bit different for every horse, and it's a tweak. And I one of my favorite mentors, Ernest Woodward, he always said that millimeters matter. And I was like, no, that rasp stroke isn't going to make that difference. No. Oh, but it does. It does. That little bit extra grind you put on a shoe, or that extra rasp strike you take off just to get it just right, can make all the difference in the world for that horse.
That's so true. That's so true. So how do you compare your videos, or what are you comparing to when you're watching the videos? Are you comparing to some sort of base model of proper movement, or talk us through that little process there?
So sometimes it's just a little bit of a process of elimination. We make a change, we watch the horses go again, we video them again, we assess, the movement. I'll assess the movement again. Did it make it better? Did it feel different for the rider? And so that's part of it. And if it does or it doesn't make a change, then we assess again. Okay, what can we try different? And then if we're still not getting there, then I think that's when we have to continue to have conversations about saddle fit, dentistry, making sure that horse is feeling good and needing to get the vet involved. And one of the touchiest subjects that I still am not sure how to delicately handle is the rider. Because a lot of times there's things that are going on that are rider induced that I can't fix. But those are tricky conversations to have.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. If the rider's not got the greatest seat, or if the rider's got challenges of their own, even I've seen down to, kind of the emotional challenges that a rider has. So they get angry, they get upset, they get to doing too much and causing extra tension in the back and the body that, of course, is going to then go down to the feet.
Absolutely. So there was this really neat video that Ernest had done, and it's up on YouTube on his page. And it was a hind end query, and he just threw it out there, what's going on with this horse? And you could see the horse, and I don't remember what the horse was doing. I don't know if he was cantering or trotting, I don't remember, but he had this weird kind of knuckle forward, and he'd land on the front part of his foot, and it was like, whoa, oh, that's gotta hurt, oh my goodness. Wow. And all you saw was that, and then it was, well, what do you do with that? And there were answers across the board. You have to shoot it this way, you have to do this, you have to do that, you have to do this. But what it ended up being was they were over half halting the horse. So it wasn't a shoeing issue at all. There was nothing we could do. It was a rider error. And as soon as that got corrected, which was right away, because the trainer was in the ring when it had happened and said, let's change this. And it went away. So, it's not always our fault. And it's not always something we have control over.
Right. And I think that goes into something that I push all the time with riders, is the understanding of the footfall and the timing of the footfall. Because, it sounds, by the sound of it, the half halt that you're talking about, it sounds to me like it was overdone, and not only overdone, but done in the wrong time. Because, it's as we say, the horse can only understand the aids when they're given in time with the footfall. So a rider with really strong aids but poor timing could certainly be, it sounds to me like they were grounding that foot too soon.
Yep, absolutely. So those are tricky conversations to have. And is it a farrier problem? Is it a horse problem? Is it a rider problem? And, it takes, especially for farriers, it takes us needing to take a step back and realize it's not personal. It's never personal. We have an issue. We need to objectively look at it and see if we can come up with a solution. And that means that sometimes we have to admit that we have a hard time as a rider. I know I do. I struggle, and I work with some of the best that I can get my hands on to try to be a better rider. But I realize that sometimes I'm half the problem.
Mm-hmm. Sure. So we need to add a mediator and a therapist to our wellness team then.
Absolutely. Mine's on the speed dial.
Oh, goodness. But you're right. It's so common for egos to get in the way. And,
yep.
I remember I had a vet as a kid who had a line that I thought was kind of the best line. He said, you let the vet do the vet's job, you let the farrier do the farrier's job, you let the trainer do the trainer's job, but you make sure they all talk to each other.
Yes, it's so important.
Yeah.
It's so important. I have got some of the best clients. We have so much fun. I love my trainers because we talk a lot and I hear how the horses are going, and it's so important. And we've gotten horses to go better than they ever have just because we started talking. And then we could brainstorm. Oh, well, if it's not a farrier issue, then okay, well, let's get the vet involved. Let's get the dentist involved. Mm-hmm. Who do we need to get involved to get to the bottom of this?
Sounds like good communication is the key to solving just about any problem.
Yes, I believe so.
That's awesome. That's fantastic. Okay, so let's see, looking through our list here. So let's talk about then the importance. We've talked about the barefoot idea, we've talked about the shoeing idea, and we've talked about kind of the when and where and why on both sides of that. Let's talk about the importance of the consistent cycle for caring for the feet.
Oh, I
Uh-oh, that's a big can of
well,
worms with a sigh like that.
well, it's fun, and I'm sure every farrier out there can relate. At least a few times a year, I'm sure we all get that phone call. I know I feel like my fair share, more than my fair share this year of those phone calls. Hi, it's fall. We really need you to come out. Okay, cool. And I'm really good at asking questions. So as much as you vet me, I vet you. I don't just ask when the horse is due. I ask when the horse was last done, which get two very different answers.
Right.
And so I think that it's super important for horses because they live with humans. And
Uh-oh. I'm going to have to call Kendra back. It looks like we had some sort of a mishap and we lost her just when things were getting good. Hang on, gang. We will be right back with what will now be part 2 of Talking About Horses, episode 12.